The blood that rewrote history. Most of the world never thought twice about it. A simple blood type, a red liquid flowing through every human vein. Type O, the universal donor, the quiet lifesaver. For decades, doctors saw it as a medical convenience, a clean match that could save anyone's life. But in 2025, researchers stumbled upon a discovery that shattered everything we thought we knew about human blood.
Ever wondered where you really come from? Not the stories, but the science. On this channel, we decode real DNA, uncover lost ancestries, and bring ancient genomes to life through cinematic storytelling. If that excites you, subscribe for weekly insights. Like the video to support science-based history. And drop a comment. Your questions help guide what we explore next.
Because what they uncovered about Type O wasn't just medical, it was evolutionary, even existential. They found clues that suggested Type O blood didn't just save lives in hospitals, it once saved humanity itself. Hidden inside the microscopic structure of red blood cells was something scientists had overlooked for over a century. A genetic pattern so ancient, so resilient, that it appeared to have survived when other bloodlines simply vanished. At first, it seemed impossible. How could something as ordinary as a blood type contain secrets of mass extinction, survival, and a forgotten chapter of human history? But as the evidence piled up, from frozen graves in Siberia, to bones unearthed in the Andes, to DNA samples sealed in government archives, a chilling story began to take shape. It told of a time long before written history, when something struck the early human population, a catastrophe so immense, so selective, that it nearly erased entire genetic lineages. In the aftermath, one blood type and one alone endured, and that blood type was Type O. The deeper scientists looked, the stranger it got. Everywhere they searched, the same pattern appeared, from isolated tribes in the Amazon to Arctic villages untouched by modern civilization. Type O was dominant, almost absolute, as if the world had once been forced through a genetic filter that allowed only one blueprint of humanity to survive. For years, these patterns were dismissed as coincidences, a side effect of isolation, migration, or genetic drift. But recent DNA mapping shattered those easy answers. Something, or someone, had acted upon our blood long ago. Something that changed the course of human evolution. In laboratories across the world, geneticists whispered about it privately, about the hidden immunological code buried deep inside Type O blood. Some believed it was nature's ultimate survival mechanism. Others thought it was the trace of a biological war older than civilization itself. Whatever it was, it defied logic, rewriting the story of who we are and what we survived to become. And what scientists just revealed about Type O blood has left them absolutely speechless. Music swells, slow, haunting build. This is not just the story of a blood type. It's the story of a genetic survivor, a silent witness to an ancient apocalypse that the world forgot. The genetic puzzle hidden in plain sight. In every biology textbook, the story of blood types seems simple enough. Your blood type is determined by the presence or absence of two antigens, A and B, sitting on the surface of your red blood cells. If you have A, you're Type A. If you have B, you're Type B. If you have both, you're AB. And if you have neither, you're Type O. Simple, clean, scientific. But what happens when simplicity hides something deeper, something ancient? For over a century, the world accepted that type O blood was just a neutral base, an empty slate that could safely mix with others. But as genetic technology advanced, researchers began noticing something strange. Type O wasn't just common. In some regions, it was too common. Across South and Central America, deep in the Amazon basin, among tribes untouched by modern civilization, nearly every individual carried type O blood. The same was true among highland Andean communities and Arctic groups isolated for thousands of years. There was almost no trace of A or B at all. It was as if the human gene pool in these regions had been scrubbed clean, leaving only the O lineage. At first, scientists explained this away with simple evolutionary logic. Founder effects, they said. Genetic drift, tiny early populations, isolated and cut off, passed along their limited traits. Over time, those traits became dominant. But the data told another story, one too precise to be random. When DNA from ancient remains was compared across millennia, a startling picture emerged. Type O hadn't just survived. It had actively outcompeted every other blood group in a sudden, violent genetic shift. This wasn't the slow drift of evolution. It was abrupt, purposeful, as if something had hunted down and erased the diversity itself. The further researchers dug, the stranger it got. The blood that lacked both A and B antigens, supposedly the most primitive form, showed a kind of genetic resilience that defied expectations. Unlike A or B, which mutate over time, O remained stable, unyielding, unchanged. The same structure found in DNA samples from the Andes appeared nearly identical to O blood found in modern humans today, tens of thousands of years later. It was as if evolution had tried to change it and failed. Why would nature preserve one blood type so perfectly across continents and epochs, while others fractured and evolved? What invisible hand was shaping this pattern, and why? Then came a revelation that shifted everything.
When researchers mapped blood type distribution globally, they found something deeply unsettling. While Europe, Asia, and Africa showed the expected balance, a mosaic of A, B, and O, the Americas told a different story. O wasn't just common, it was near total. A and B weren't merely rare, they were gone. This was more than a genetic oddity, it was a void, a missing chapter in human biology. If the early ancestors of native populations carried a mix of blood types, then something had happened after they crossed into the Americas, something that wiped the others out completely. But what? No plague or disease known to history could be that selective. No migration pattern could be that absolute. In whispered conversations at research conferences, scientists began to question the unthinkable. Could there have been a biological event, an ancient immunological war that reshaped humanity itself? A war that left only one blood type standing? The official explanations grew quieter, the gaps in data wider. Yet the evidence refused to disappear. Every sample, every bone, every genome pointed to the same inescapable truth. Something had purged the bloodlines of the Americas, leaving behind only those with the simplest, most adaptable form of life's most vital fluid, type O. And the more researchers uncovered, the more it seemed that what had been dismissed as simplicity was in fact a design for survival. But survival from what? To answer that question, scientists would have to follow the blood trail, across ice,
across time, and deep into the forgotten heart of prehistory. The cracking of the ice bridge theory. For decades, the story of how humanity reached the Americas seemed settled. A frozen bridge of land, the Beringia Land Bridge, once stretched between Siberia and Alaska during the last ice age. Across it, small bands of hunter-gatherers ventured into the unknown, following herds of mammoths and caribou, seeking warmer lands and food. According to this classic tale, those few brave migrants became the ancestors of every indigenous people across North and South America. And because they represented such a tiny group, they carried only a small slice of the genetic diversity from their Siberian homeland. This, scientists said, explained everything, including why type O blood dominated. A simple genetic bottleneck. A neat, tidy story. But neat stories have a way of falling apart under the weight of new evidence. As ancient DNA analysis improved, the world's best geneticists began comparing the genomes of early Siberians, East Asians, and the oldest skeletal remains in North America. And what they found shattered the simplicity of the land bridge theory. Ancient bones unearthed near Lake Baikal in Siberia, dated to over 15,000 years ago, revealed a population rich in blood diversity. They carried all major blood types, A, B, AB, and O. This was no isolated, homogeneous tribe. It was a thriving, genetically complex civilization. If these were the ancestors of the first Americans, then the question became chillingly obvious. Why did that diversity vanish the moment humans set foot in the New World? Something didn't add up. If migration alone caused the dominance of type O, there should have been traces, fragments of A or B alleles in the early DNA of native peoples. But every analysis told the same story. Those alleles weren't rare. They were gone, erased, as if an invisible line had been drawn somewhere between Siberia and the American plains, a line that A and B blood types simply did not cross alive. Scientists began re-examining every theory that could explain it. Was it climate? No, environmental factors don't selectively remove blood groups. Was it diet, migration stress, random chance? None could produce such a precise and lasting effect. Something had targeted those bloodlines, something powerful, selective, and merciless. Then, in 2024, a joint research team from Japan and Canada released a study that quietly shook the scientific world. It revealed that ancient remains in Alaska, dating to the very first waves of migration, still showed faint traces of type A blood. But just a few thousand years later, in central North America, those traces disappeared entirely. It was as if the genetic shift happened mid-journey, after the crossing, but before the continent was fully settled. A silent transformation that swept through populations with astonishing speed. Something had struck those early settlers, an event so lethal that only one blood type had the immunity to endure it. But what kind of force could do that? A pathogen? A virus? Or something even more complex, a shift in the planet itself, in oxygen, in biology, in the immune system's very architecture? To the scientific establishment, such questions were dangerous. They hinted at a selective extinction, an ancient biological catastrophe buried beneath the ice of history. A catastrophe so precise it had rewritten the human genome. By the time the early people spread across the Americas, the deed was done. Type A and B had vanished. Type O alone remained. Blank, ancient, indestructible. The ice bridge theory had cracked wide open, and with it, the comforting story of human migration began to collapse. If bloodlines had truly been purged, then the survivors who carried type O weren't just travelers. They were the last of their kind. The vanishing bloodlines. By early 2025, the quiet murmurs in genetic research labs had become a low, uneasy hum. Too many data points no longer fit the traditional timeline of human evolution. Everywhere scientists looked, from the Andean highlands to the Arctic tundra, one pattern refused to break. Type O blood had not merely survived, it had replaced everything else. But replacement wasn't the right word. When researchers ran genetic sequencing on ancient DNA from skeletal remains in both North and South America, they found no gradual shift, no genetic trail leading from A or B to O. Instead, the record showed a hard cutoff, a sudden break where entire alleles simply disappeared. To evolutionary biologists, that was impossible. Even extinction leaves fingerprints, traces of transition, mutation, or hybridization. But here, there was nothing. It was as if every A and B gene had been wiped clean from the human record, all at once. For months, researchers struggled to explain it. Maybe the samples were too small. Maybe contamination skewed the results. But then came a finding that eliminated all doubt. At a high-altitude dig site in Peru, a joint team of geneticists and archaeologists recovered remains from a small group dated to roughly 13,200 years old, among the oldest ever found in the Americas. Initial analysis showed a balanced mix of blood group markers, including rare traces of the B antigen. But beneath those same layers of sediment, in remains just a few hundred years younger, the B markers were gone, completely. Not diluted, erased. Something had swept through those early populations with terrifying efficiency. Something capable of killing anyone who carried a specific antigen in their blood. By the time these findings were published, private emails began circulating among a handful of senior geneticists. The subject lines were cautious but chilling. Selective pathogen theory, antigen target event, survivor bloodline hypothesis. The idea was simple and horrifying. Thousands of years ago, long before recorded history, humanity might have faced a pathogen that didn't just attack randomly. It hunted antigens, exploiting the very differences that defined our blood. If true, it would explain everything. Why type O, stripped of both A and B markers, was the only one left standing. Why it spread so universally in the Americas. Why genetic diversity suddenly collapsed in an instant. But that raised an even darker question. Where had such a pathogen come from? Some believed it was natural, a mutation, a perfect storm of biology and climate. Others whispered theories far more unsettling, that the event didn't start in the Americas at all, that it followed those early travelers across the ice, already stalking them before they ever set foot in the New World. A pathogen ancient enough to predate civilization itself, something humanity had encountered before and somehow survived. Researchers at the University of Kyoto began running cross-comparisons with modern viral DNA. What they found deepened the mystery further. A fragment of dormant viral code buried in the human genome matched no known disease on Earth, but it appeared only in individuals with type O blood. Not A, not B, not AB. To some, this was proof that the pathogen had integrated itself into our DNA, transforming survivors into carriers of immunity. To others, it hinted at something beyond infection, an adaptation event on a scale never before seen in human evolution. Officially, the papers released in late 2025 were cautious, almost apologetic in tone. But between the lines, one could sense the dread. The human species may have come terrifyingly close to extinction, and the only ones who lived to tell the tale were those whose blood bore no distinguishing markers. The survivors' descendants would go on to populate 2 continents, but in their blood they carried not just life, they carried a memory written in immunity, a memory that some scientists now believe isn't done with us yet, because recent genome scans revealed something deeply unsettling. The ancient viral fragment, the same one thought long dormant, is beginning to show signs of reactivation in isolated samples worldwide. Whatever it was that once erased entire bloodlines may not be finished. A silent witness. Type O blood flows quietly through millions of veins today, a universal donor, often overlooked in its simplicity. But beneath that ordinary appearance lies a story written in survival. Every drop carries the legacy of an ancient catastrophe, a filter so precise that only certain humans endured, a silent witness to extinction, resilience, and adaptation. Scientists now realize that this blood type is more than just a medical convenience. It is a living archive, a record of the forces that shaped humanity long before history began. And yet, for centuries, this story remained hidden, buried in bones, encoded in DNA, overlooked by textbooks and ignored by the public, until now. What we are beginning to see is staggering. Type O blood is not just a survivor. It is a testament to what humanity endured, a genetic blueprint of resilience etched deep within us all. The discovery is both humbling and terrifying. It raises questions about the past and about the hidden pressures that may still shape our survival today. Because if Type O carries the memory of ancient threats, then the blood itself may still hold secrets we are only just beginning to understand.
Today, Type O blood is everywhere. In hospitals, in blood banks, in the veins of millions across continents. Its simplicity masks a profound truth. This blood is not just a universal donor, but a survivor of a forgotten apocalypse. The evidence is clear. Across the Americas, in isolated communities, and even in Polynesian and Arctic populations, Type O has endured where all others vanished. Ancient pathogens, environmental catastrophes, or forces lost to time may have decimated entire bloodlines. And yet, Type O persisted. Blank, resilient, adaptive. Modern science now whispers what earlier generations could only suspect. Embedded in Type O blood are genetic codes that shape immune responses, balance inflammation, and modulate survival in ways other blood types cannot. Variants like IL-1752C act as biological safeguards, reducing the risk of catastrophic immune overreactions. This is no accident. It is the silent fingerprint of survival etched across millennia. Even the oldest skeletal remains hint at a shared story, a selective filter, an invisible catastrophe, and the enduring legacy of those who survived. The blood remembers what history has forgotten. And the story doesn't end with the past. Within Type O blood lies a code that may still protect, guide, and shape our response to threats we do not yet understand. It is a reminder that the human body carries not just life, but memory. It carries the echoes of extinction and the blueprint of resilience. For millions, this flows unnoticed, ordinary. But for those who pause, who look closer, it tells a story far larger than any individual life. A story of survival, adaptation, and the invisible battles fought long before civilization existed. The truth is unsettling, yet awe-inspiring. Humanity did not merely survive, it endured. And in the quiet veins of type O blood, the memory of that endurance flows on. So next time you think about blood, think about what it carries beyond life itself. A secret, a history, a warning, and a testament to the power of survival.